Welcome to another edition of Spotlight on Asia. This is one of a series of videos about doing business in Japan, all of which are sponsored by Berea Partners, a Tokyo-based venture capital and private equity fund. I'm your host, Jennifer Malaire, and today we will continue our discussion on the incorporation process and take a closer look at one of the key decisions involved. When setting up a business in Japan, one of the most important decisions a company must make is who to make the representative director. It's a major concern for foreign investors and one that requires special attention. With us today is John Carlson, President of Japan Association of Independent Directors. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's good to be here.
Tell us about the organization.
The Japan Association of Independent Directors is a non-profit organization dedicated to improving corporate governance in Japan. Our members consist mainly of directors and shareholders of foreign-owned companies in Japan.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Why is this an issue, and can't anyone be a representative director?
Sure, if you don't mind giving up control to one of your local staff.
Are there no requirements to be a director?
Technically speaking, Jennifer, the representative director need only be an adult with no criminal record and a resident of Japan. But if that's your only concern, you're headed for trouble.
Can you elaborate?
The days of foreign companies appointing their Japan guy as the representative director are pretty much over. Savvy companies now use independent directors to fill this role.
And why is that?
A number of reasons. Of primary concern is internal control. This is especially true of foreign companies that are subject to Sarbanes-Oxley or other independence issues.
And how does the use of independent directors address this concern?
By separating directors from employees, separating management from the sales and operations staff, it effectively limits the ability of employees to commit wrongful actions that are detrimental to the company. It ensures that only directors represent the company in important business matters. In other words, Jennifer, it's good corporate governance.
I see, but come on, this is Japan. Do we really need to be worried about rogue directors?
It may be less common than elsewhere, but it does happen in Japan. We've seen cases of outright fraud by the local director who have managed to fool or mislead the parent company. You have to remember, Jennifer, the representative director has the power and authority to bind the company in almost all matters, which means the position is ripe for abuse.
Doesn't this add an extra layer of expense to the business?
Not if you take the tax consequences into consideration.
What do you mean by that?
This may be more of a concern to the finance people of the organization, but generally speaking, bonuses paid to directors are non-deductible for Japanese corporate tax purposes.
And to the non-finance people in the room, that means...
If the director has a bonus component to their compensation, like most key staff do, it's going to cost the company dearly. It'll be paid on an after-tax basis and will do nothing to reduce the taxable income of the company.
Can you give us an example?
Say the company's gross income is 100 million yen.
So what is that, about $1 million US?
More or less. So, assuming the director receives a bonus of, say, 25 million yen, the entire 100 million is still subject to Japanese corporate tax. Whereas, if that same individual were made an employee, the bonus of 25 million could be deducted and the taxable income would be reduced to 75 million.
And what is the corporate tax rate in Japan?
The effective rate is roughly 42%, relatively high. So in the first case, where the full 100 is subject to tax, the payable tax would be about 42 million. But if you're able to deduct the bonus to 25 million, so only 75 million is subject to tax, then the payable tax would be about 32 million, leading to a potential tax savings of 10 million yen, or roughly 100,000 US dollars.
So what you're saying is it's going to cost the company more to appoint an employee as a director.
If they're going to pay them a bonus, yes.
So what's the solution?
Again, separate employees from directors. Pay the employees a bonus, which is fully deductible, and use an independent director who receives no bonus.
And just so we're clear, what do you mean by bonus?
A bonus is broadly defined as any irregular payment. the classic example being an annual performance bonus.
I see, but don't most senior staff want to be a director?
Not if they want to receive a bonus without creating a financial burden to the company, nor if they want to minimize their individual tax liability.
What do you mean by individual tax liability?
On an individual level, there may also be negative tax consequences to being a director.
Can you give us an example?
For example, directors are not able to reduce their taxable income to the extent they're outside of Japan on business. Their entire Japan source income is generally subject to Japanese individual income tax.
But this assumes they travel frequently?
Yes, which is often the case of country heads of foreign multinationals. But if they're an expat employee, not a director, and they're paid offshore, they may be able to take advantage of this days in, days out benefit.
Okay, what about company housing?
That's another benefit that favors employees. If structured properly, company housing to employees is taxed at a significantly lower rate than directors. The taxable benefit is about 10% as opposed to 50% for directors.
So it could cost the individual more if they're appointed as a director rather than an employee?
Exactly.
But in reality, isn't this only something that foreign companies do? Do we really see Japanese companies appointing independent directors?
There has been some resistance among traditional Japanese companies, but there are encouraging signs. In the last year, a number of government-affiliated study groups have come out in favor of having independent directors on Japanese boards. The Tokyo Stock Exchange supports this in principle, as does the ruling Democratic Party of Japan.
Would you view this as a trend?
It's definitely a sign of the times. Foreign companies have embraced the concept, and now it's time for Japanese companies to get on board.
And as a practical matter, where do companies find an independent director?
Well, that's one area where the association might be able to help. We often introduce suitable directors to foreign companies in Japan.
I can see how that would be very helpful. Well, that concludes another edition of Spotlight on Asia. Thank you, John, for sharing your insights.
My pleasure, Jennifer.